Good morning, Lena. So we left our starter on the windowsill overnight, so let's look and see what's happened with him. You can see the rubber band that we left to mark our beginning spot. He has more than doubled. If you look closely, you can see that he's got lots and lots of bubbles, lots of effervescence. And when you look inside, you can see that he's got strands of gluten that have formed. So he's ready to go to work. I don't know if you can see all that. Can you see it? Okay, so in any case, prior to mixing him, let's do this. I want to show you that I have already put my flour together with some sea salt here and some inclusions. I'm going to put chia seed and flaxseed in with this dough. I'm making a double batch, so this is quite a bit of flour, maybe more than you're going to be seeing. Now, the yeast from the starter does not want to come into direct contact with the salt. That will inhibit its job. So we're just prior to mixing in the starter and the water, we're going to just mix this up a little bit so that the salt is dispersed a little. So I'm going to weigh out my ingredients here for the starter. Now, the starter I'm going to mix with water. That's the normal course of events. I'm also going to add milk. Milk or any kind of fat like in olive oil or whatever will help to make a softer crumb. So that'll improve things. So I've got water here, the water that we had boiled and cooled from last night. I'm going to add that. In this recipe, I'm looking for a total of 660 grams of fluid. It's easy to get picky about this, but the differences are minor enough. All right, so I've got these mixed together, and I'm going to just double check that. I want you to know that I'm using a recipe out of a book by a woman named Elaine Boddy. She's written quite a bit. I really adore her approach. It's very simple. You can really get lost in the weeds with the sourdough, and you can take it as deep as you want. But she makes her recipes are very accessible. Now, I'm not going to share the recipe over the internet because she's worked hard to compile these books, but I really recommend anything that she writes. In any case, so now we have the fluid here. We're going to also put in starter. And when you put the starter in the water, you want to disperse it well. Let me zero this out. And if you ever use your starter and realize that in order to make the recipe that's called for, you've used every bit of your starter, even this much starter is enough to start the culture again. Don't worry. All you have to do is put some water in there and give it and flour and give it some time, and it will relight. You won't have any problems with it. All right, we've got this in here. Now, because I want this to have access to the flour, I'm going to work to disperse the starter in the fluid so that when it works on the flour, it can get right to work eating the flour and not have to work its way through any of the other starter. You can use a whisk. I'm using a fork today just because it's accessible and it's easier to do. So I'm going to try and work this around a little. Now, I will tell you that because the milk was cold out of the refrigerator, I actually warmed the water to kind of counteract it so that the dough itself, when it's autolysing, is warm and doesn't have to warm up from a cold start. I think that's good enough for now, so let's put this in here. And what we're going to do at this point, and I'll tell you what, let me wash my hand quickly. And we're going to come back and mix this dough. One of the things that we're trying to get is all of the flour exposed to moisture, and we want to make sure that there's no dry flour on the bottom. my scraper out, please. Okay. This is going to take just a few minutes. Oops. Too much enthusiasm. So you can see here there's still some dry bits on the bottom, so I'm going to work hard to make sure that those are included, because you can't have any of that while this process is taking place. There are special attachments to mixers that you can use that will do this work for you. I don't have one, but I also don't desire one. I enjoy this process, so it might not make for good film, but it certainly is very pleasing to do in your home. Still some dry on the bottom. I don't know if you can see that, so I'm going to have to work to get that joined in there. But then as soon as it's mixed, we're not really doing anything else. All we're doing is making sure that the flour has the ability to become hydrated, and then we're just going to let it sit for about an hour. After an hour's time, we'll come back and we'll do the kneading that we do, but the kneading that you do with sourdough is in the bowl. So it's a very, except for the fact that I've been flinging dough out on the counter here, other than that, it's a very neat process, not messy at all. All right, so we've got most of the dry incorporated from the bottom. At this point, it's very wet and very sticky. Okay, so I've got the dry part taken care of on the bottom. And it appears that there's nothing dry left in the dough here. So I'll scrape down my hands and scrape down the sides, and then we can let it sit. Here is the job for the scraper that I was telling you about last night. And you can see that this just peels the dough right off your hands. And the dough also does not stick to this very much. So it's really, it's worth its weight in gold, honestly. Oh, I think that's enough. The rest of this will wash off. You do want to avoid putting dough or starter down the drain in any amount. The dough and the starter both become hard as rocks. So if you do find that you have to wash something off, make sure to really dilute the starter or the dough before you allow it to go down your drain. Or better yet, rub your dry hands together and throw it away in the trash can. Or you can, if you find yourself with extra starter or dough, you can put it on a piece of parchment paper and dry it out and feed it to chickens. They love this. Now, you don't want anybody else to be eating the raw starter or dough, but chickens will love it, and it dries out easily. Okay, so now we've got our sides scraped down. This is ready to sit quietly and absorb the moisture. The Autolyse process, that's Autolyse. And as I said, you can find more information about that on the King Arthur Flour website. Here's my shower cap. I'm going to put this over. You don't want it to dry out, so we're going to leave it to get moist. And then I'm going to go wash my hands. But then we just let that sit for 40 minutes to an hour, and then we come back and we knead. See you soon.